here today. Thanks for tuning in. Oh, now we are live. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in. I am Wyatt. I am the co-founder and CEO of Female Founder Collective, and the 10th House Female Founder Collective is a platform and a foundation that supports elevating women in order for them to be able to achieve their business dreams, female founders. And as far as 10th House goes, it is a new paid membership platform that allows you access to incredible founders at various stages, that gives you tips and advice on funding and the different types that exist, and that gives you connections to incredible experts that we vet, that give workshops, that give you information on everything from all sorts of skill building, from how to raise capital to how to build a customer acquisition model to how to think about building a team. And finally, we have a number of different member benefits within there with partners like Zendesk and HubSpot and JustWorks. So it's all in there. It's really rich, and we hope that you'll join us. But I'm super excited today to have member Bassima Mroue, who is the co-founder and CEO of SkinTē. And we're going to go through her journey because it's a really interesting one, talking about ownership, talking about getting really incredible people in your corner along on the journey, and building teams and building products and companies. So super excited to have you here, Bassima. Thank you so much. And welcome.
Thank you.
I want to start off because I want to go through your career journey. It's so interesting. I had the fortune of talking to Bassima. It was about 2 months ago, and I was sitting on a stoop and hearing her background, and was so fascinated at all that you have experienced in your short lifetime. But I wanted to sort of start off by talking about the fact that you grew up in the Côte d'Ivoire from a Lebanese family that had to shape your approach to life, and would love to sort of hear about how it has.
Absolutely. And yeah, thank you so much again for having me. It's an honor. And yeah, so I was born in the US, but raised in Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa. And both my parents are Lebanese. So when people ask me, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm a global citizen. I feel like I'm part of many different cultures. But growing up in Côte d'Ivoire had a huge influence on my life. The gap between the rich and the poor is so strong there. And you grow up really seeing the culture of Côte d'Ivoire and how beautiful it is, and how people are happy sometimes with the simplest things in life. It was very grounding for me to grow up there. And then when I was 15, we moved to Canada. My father was very education oriented, and he wanted to make sure we had a great education. And so we ended up moving to Ottawa. So I went from one of the hottest places to one of the coldest, Ottawa in Ontario.
How was that? That move must have been a massive culture shock.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. I think going from Côte d'Ivoire to the culture in Canada, and the difference in mindset and how people live day to day was definitely different. But for me, it was the Western culture versus in Côte d'Ivoire. I think the biggest contrast for me was around, the orientation around family and the simple things in lives, versus when you come to the West, there's a little bit more around material things. It's not like a blanket statement across the board, but definitely a difference in in Côte d'Ivoire, people take their time at lunch. They take a 2-hour, break to go home, take a nap, and then eat with their family. And it's kind of built into that culture. And when you come to the West, it's a little bit more like go, go, go. And now I'm finding that, especially since COVID, we're all kind of going, let's take a step back. And instead of integrating work into your life, make sure that, or life into your work, integrate work into your life, the other way around. And so I learned so much from seeing these different cultures. And there are some things, in Canada that were amazing learnings for me as well. So, and then from there, I started working in the US, and I worked a little bit in Belgium. So I've kind of been a little bit all over. And I believe experiencing all these different cultures has been a huge blessing. I know sometimes people worry about moving so much in your life, but to me, I got to pick up pieces from all these beautiful cultures and learn from that. And I think that's a huge gift. And also have a lot of empathy for people. I think that's one of the biggest things. I feel like if there was an education system where you had to go to different parts of the world and learn, it would make you a truly empathic person, because you really learn about that culture versus just, it feeling foreign to you.
I love that, and I think it is so important. In fact, my husband moved around a lot when he was young as well, and it made him able to form relationships really quickly and to relate to people very quickly. And I think in business, that's obviously incredibly important. Is to really, they say with negotiation, empathy is probably your best asset, right? Is being able to really understand where the other side is coming from, so you can come up with solutions that make everybody happy, and like they feel like they're winning. How about your previous positions? You know, you've started working in the US. You've had a really storied career, if you will, you know, working at brands like Nike, working at having your own consultancy, the Sarah Blakely Foundation. You've done a ton. Can you talk to us a little bit about that journey and how it sort of ultimately led you to starting SkinTē?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, no one believes me, those who know me well, but I started off in IT coding. So when I graduated from Queen's University in
Yet
Canada,
another
I know I went
interesting fact.
straight to Cargill in Minneapolis, which is one of the, you know, privately owned company, and it's agriculture. And so for me, I decided to go into that because I'd read an article, literally, this sounds crazy, but an article that women made, they needed more women in IT and they could probably command a bigger salary. So I was like, I'm going to do that. And I did that, and I jumped around quite a bit, but staying in IT for several years. I'm kind of nomadic in my behavior early on. I would last about a year and then I'd move on to the next one for a year. And then I went back to Canada and worked for a pharmaceutical company. And then that's when Nike knocked on my door. And that became one of the best experiences of my life. You know, when Nike moved me to Portland, Oregon, I started off in IT, and then from there moved into supply chain. And I did a stint in Europe as well as an expat around our supply chain process there, and then came back to headquarters and moved into brand strategy and learned so much around strategy and brand. And it was the best. I always talk about Nike as like my real life MBA. And it was one of the best companies I ever worked for. And back to the idea of relationships, those relationships actually played a critical role in SkinTē. I never would have dreamed that working for Nike and then working for Sarah Blakely, which I'll talk about in a minute, you know, ends up leading to such a powerful impact on what I did with SkinTē. But you don't think about it at the time. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about is your fundraising journey and your entrepreneurship starts way back on decisions you made. I ended up getting a lot of criticism at times of why I didn't take my career straight up in IT and became like a chief technology officer, or why I was zigzagging around. That's something that a lot of younger women ask me about. And I say, you know, there's many ways to get to the end goal. You don't have to go in a linear manner. And if I had done the linear way, I don't think I would have been equipped to do SkinTē. So I did zigzag a lot, and I had kind of a loose plan, but I was following my heart a lot of times, and I was following my gut around the experiences that I wanted. That's why I didn't stick to just IT and I didn't stick to just supply chain. I was interested in a lot of things, and it made me look a little bit all over the place to certain people, but then where I landed ended up, it was the perfect journey for me. So that, you know, and then when I think about leaving Nike, which relates to SkinTē. So in my last couple of years at Nike, and not many people knew this, I hid this quite a bit. I had severe back problems. I had sciatica. So my health was shut down. I had stage 4 endometriosis as well and didn't know it. I was just constantly not feeling well and trying to hide it. I didn't want people to know. But it got to a breaking point where I had to get back surgery. And that's when I left Nike. So I left Nike in 2014 and focused on my back surgery. And it's serendipitous. You know, you look at kind of breakdowns in your life and what they lead to. My surgeon at the time said, hey, I want you to take a lot of collagen before, during, and after your surgery. And I was like, collagen, you know, that sounds so gross. And my mom was actually telling me take collagen pills as well. So I listened. And then, you know, I was recovering from the surgery, and all these people were like, wow, did you go away somewhere? Did you get some work done? And, you know, I was glowing. Like, no, I had back surgery. I was like, it wasn't that kind of surgery. And so it was really funny. And I was like, wow, this stuff really
I got
works.
surgery on my back.
Exactly. And I, you know, I went to my naturopathic doctor's office, and it's Dr. Amy Bader, who's my co-founder, and she's phenomenal. And it was an interesting
doctor.
time. She's a doctor. She's a naturopathic doctor. I'd been with her for 7 years. Love her. And I remember going into her office and saying, hey, I love this collagen stuff. And I literally was like, do you have a brand that tastes better? I'm sick of bone broth. I'm sick of powders. I sounded so high maintenance. And I was like, I don't want the pills because I have to wait before I can eat. And she's like, well, actually, I just, recently got divorced and I've been focusing on natural ways to age gracefully. So her and her best friend, Elizabeth, had been coming up with all these different recipes with teas and herbs and collagen and giving them to patients like me. And it turns out that more than one patient, a lot of them were complaining to Dr. Bader that they didn't enjoy the collagen. They weren't consistent with it. And our third co-founder, Elizabeth, had the most tragic story. She lost a child at 2. It was horrific. And so it was an interesting time. The three of us came together around these different breakdowns that led to this breakthrough. So I'm a huge believer in that. And it was a very intuitive relationship because Amy started giving me recipes and I was like, you know what, Amy, like I don't have time to go source this herb and it sounds lovely and it tastes so good, but can you just make it for me? And I said, can I buy it from you? And something clicked and we decided, because I had a strategy background, I said, hey, I'll help you pro bono, write you a business plan, and can you guys go make it? And of course, long story short, we got together and said, let's do this. And that's when SkinTē was formed. And they had the idea sooner. But when when the three of us got together, it was like this beautiful synergy. A chef, a doctor, and someone who had a business background. So that's how that started. And what was interesting is we needed to save money for it. And I was on my way to work for Spanx on a contract for a few months. And so that led me to working for one of the most incredible women, I think, in the world, Sarah Blakely. And it was kind of crazy because it's like, how did the universe put this woman in my path? Because I'm saving money to launch this company with my co-founders, and I get to work for someone who's done the most amazing things with Spanx and her purpose. And I kind of almost got to do I call it the inner MBA with Sarah. Like Nike was more the mechanics of the MBA, and with Sarah, it's more what it takes on the inside to launch a company. And so I got to learn from one of the best. I'm sorry?
I said, that's so beautiful.
You. Yeah. So I feel the universe put the right people in my path. I'm a big believer in that. And from there, I worked with Sarah for a couple of years. I helped with strategy. I also was the president of her foundation. It was a huge honor, and I'm on the board now. And then I came back because, she's one of those few women in the world and, founders that would say to you, go ahead and work for me and do this on the side. I mean, how many people would let you do that? And so she let me do that.
Very
and
generous.
then and I was able, which wasn't threatened by it in terms of, are you going to do enough for Spanx? It was more like there's room for both. And so I was able to do that. And then I came back and launched the brand in LA with Amy and Elizabeth in January of 2019. So that's kind of how it all comes together.
Wow. And in terms of sort of keeping that relationship with Sarah, and I oftentimes talk about being in position to be in position, right? How do you, like you said, the universe put those people in your path, but you were able to take advantage of those opportunities and really shepherd them in and get them on board with your company as investors, but also supporters of your journey. Can you talk a little bit about how you've handled that, right? How have the actual conversations gone? And what advice you can give to other founders to look within their network and find the Sarah Blakeleys of the world. Maybe it's not, a Sarah Blakely, but maybe it's a similar person who has great connections, who has influence that could be really pivotal in shaping their fundraising journey or just in getting their product out there.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people ask me that because how'd you get them? How you just went and asked them? And I was like, no, actually, the relationship I have with these incredible people, Sarah Blakely, and who led me to Leslie Blodgett, the founder of Bare Minerals, and other people like Larry Miller, the chairman of the Jordan brand, who's an investor. These are relationships I cultivated because I was so grateful. I was like, oh my God, these people are amazing. I'm so honored. I can learn from them. It wasn't kind of like, can I get their money? It didn't start that way. It started with just these relationships that I was feeling so honored, so humbled that I was around them. I could learn so much from them. And actually, I rarely directly asked. So for me, it was, sometimes they asked me, like, I would be so passionate about the story and what I was doing that my first few investors were actually people that offered to say, if you're interested to invest, or if you're looking for investment, call me. And I'm like, oh my God. And, then we'd call them, and then that's how it started. But very, very early on, to me, it wasn't transactional. And I think that's important. I think gratitude is a huge part of it. Nurturing relationships starts way sooner than all that. A lot of Nike people ended up investing in my company, and I was just like, oh my God, like, I can't believe they're investing. And it was relationships from way before. I didn't come in with came from Africa to Canada and Nike with no relationships. So I always tell people it's what you do day to day in life that can lead to the most unexpected. And it is about being in a state of gratitude and being curious and wanting to be around people you can learn from. And a lot of the time, the way I did it, because one of the things I do want to address is I had a lot of problem asking for money, a lot. It was very hard for me. I felt culturally, my mom was married, at 14. Her mom was married at 16. I grew up a little bit seeing, not necessarily seeing independence in women. So my father was a huge influence on my life and wanted me to have a great education. And I didn't want to be married young. I wanted to be independent. So to me, money equaled independence. So suddenly asking for money became a huge kind of burden, I felt. And I got a lot of help in terms of that. In the beginning, when I would ask for it, I'd feel this heavy burden of, oh my God, what if it doesn't go well? And what if this happens? And I learned from one of my coaches, Brett Costin, when I was having trouble asking for money, he made me do this exercise, and he said, ask for a strawberry, just ask me for a strawberry. And the way I was asking, he's like, you're not asking for it in a way that makes me want to invest. You're like scared. So there was this energy around, this is a burden. And when I shifted the mindset to, oh, wow, these people are really investing in you and your story. They're investing in an opportunity. I'm offering an opportunity. Investors know there's a risk involved. I'm going to do 1000% everything we can to make sure we're successful. And I'm confident we can be. But when you shift that mindset a little bit more, like I'm presenting an opportunity, it changes your energy. And I think that's really important for women, as part of the journey, and kind of understanding your relationship to fundraising. It pushed me emotionally and spiritually more than anything. And it got easier and easier as I went. But early on, it's funny, it was the women who invested. They believed in the dream and the story. And I think you can't underestimate the passion and the story. I think Elizabeth, Amy, and I coming together as three women, breaking through, what we'd gone through, was a story that inspired. And then our passion around the product and the thought behind it, that's what people are investing in early on. It's not necessarily, your revenue numbers later.
Right. Because early on, a lot of people ask this, and it's almost impossible to project out what you're going to be able to do. So as an investor, and I'm an angel investor, it really is about that person and your belief in their ability to execute, and your belief in that vision. But I loved your point, because I often find that specifically women aren't as confident when they're pitching. And it probably does rest a lot in the discomfort around asking for money. So I love that you shared that you were uncomfortable, and sort of reframing the process, I think, is so important, because it feels inauthentic. If you're uncomfortable asking for money, it's not going to be a snap and overnight you're all of a sudden comfortable.
Exactly.
I think it's, like you said, it's really about sort of reframing the energy around that conversation. And so your passion and your love for the product and what you're doing shines through, and that story shines through. So that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So let's get into, as you were about to raise, and sort of that process with your investors, dilutions, like thinking about the negotiation, right? Because coming back to money, it's a really difficult thing. How much ownership do you want to give away, or are you willing to give away, and for what persons? Can you kind of walk through how you and your co-founders thought about that, and how your investors in some ways helped you through that process?
Yeah, it's really challenging. I'll put it out there. When you're new to this world and you're fundraising, there's this tug of war between, I'll never forget someone telling me, not all money is equal money, Bassima. And I'm like, no, it is equal. We need it now, and you kind of, my partners and I are, and then suddenly I learned it isn't all equal money. It's true. And I have turned away money because I didn't feel like it was the right investor to become part of the family, let's say, because you have to really be thoughtful about who you want part of the family, and their values and what they're looking for, because now they're entering your family and they're helping you grow this company. So for me, a lot of it was with my business partners and I is we wanted to make sure that we were a small part. We always joked we'd rather be a small part of a large pie than a big part of something small. That is a mindset. That's a decision you have to make early on. I think anyone who can own 100% of their company, oh my gosh, that's the way to go. More power to you, grow it. That's incredible. In our case with beverage, it's not easy to do that. It's very capital intensive. You need the capital to grow it. So Amy, Elizabeth, and I had this mindset very early on that we'd rather bring the right people on, have them be part of the family, even if we were diluted, so that we could be part of something bigger. And we felt we needed those people on the journey with us. So that's how we thought about it. The other thing for us that was important was, that's why who joins you is that important, because as their ownership increases, or if you're further diluted, that you still have, the values and the mindset around how you want to run the company. I think also the board becomes really important, your ability to have a say. And with Elizabeth, Amy, and I, we have, for example, 2 seats on the board that we can appoint. That's really helpful. And so I think thinking through all that is really important. It's a nightmare with lawyers.
The 3 of you have 2
Yeah.
seats. Okay.
Yeah, out of 5. So I think, we can appoint 2 seats. And that was really important to us. And we have friendly board members, like everyone was handpicked. So it's not, you have to be really careful with that. I believe you want people that are going to push and share opinions and have diversity, but it is also really important that the values across the board are similar. So that was another one. It is really challenging with lawyers because there's so many opinions, and that's the biggest thing I learned. I'm like, where's the blueprint? How should this be done? There is no how should this be done. There's some that are most commonly people do X, or in this situation people do that. But at the end of the day, it really is how you customize it based on what you want in life. So I think as founders, you need to be clear what you want. What's your end game? If it's an exit versus This is just a way to make money. And that was something Elizabeth and Amy and I very early on were so aligned, where I think we're, as female founders, so unbelievably aligned in terms of our values and what we're looking for. So it hasn't been a point of tension for us. But I've heard a lot of stories around when that's not aligned, it does become a problem.
Yeah. And how did you know you were aligned? Was that something where early on, like it's never been a process of having to align, and you just...
No, it's definitely been a process. I think the difference is Amy is a doctor. Elizabeth has a culinary background and also has worked in the corporate world. And I've worked in the corporate world. There was so much respect for each of our roles. And so that was really important. We had very distinct roles within the company. No one wanted the other person's role. Elizabeth and Amy did not want me in the kitchen. And I definitely wouldn't, they did not want my role. So it was such great respect there. But we went through a process for sure, but it always ended up being aligned. One thing that is kind of funny about us, and we joke about this, is around the big stuff, it's weird how quickly we are aligned. And I don't know if it's just, we're lucky. I think luck does play a part. But around big stuff, it's been pretty smooth sailing with the 3 of us. There was times we go up and down and we have different opinions around the business or certain things, but it's been around the big stuff, surprisingly, where you might have more conflict. The alignment has happened pretty quickly. Again, I think it goes back to values and who we are as people, and also who you go into business with matters. So I always tell people, if you're looking to bring in business partners, it is really hard. It is such a tough journey. You need that foundation of respect and trust to be there, because if that's not there, it's a shaky journey. So I think it's because our values were aligned. We had a lot of respect for each other, and we knew no matter what, we would get to a good place.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's a really good point. I also think that you guys define roles. And I found that in the beginning part of a startup, that is so crucial, is that everybody knows, what is my role? What are my KPIs? Where am I sprinting? Because that's the only way you can go fast, right? If you don't know where you're going, you're winding around and it becomes a really inefficient journey. So I think that brings up a really good point. And then in terms of your investors and the board seats, how did you determine who to give board seats to? How do you keep them involved? Like, what do your investor relations conversations look like?
Yeah, so we were really intentional. I think one of the things I do think is my superpower is I'm very self-aware. And so we knew that, we don't have beverage experience. None of us did. We knew that our product intersected beauty and wellness. So we wanted someone on the board with a strong beauty background. We wanted someone who was a marketing powerhouse. We wanted someone that came from e-com. We wanted someone. So we were very intentional around what did the business need and what we needed for support. And in terms of how to keep them engaged, it's actually, I just have the best board members and investors. It's been amazing, but it is a relationship. And it was funny. It's like, it's an art and a science. You have to have a relationship with each one, understand their ways. There's one board member who, doesn't necessarily speak a lot, but when you need that person, oh my God, and you're in trouble, you give that person a call and they literally are there for you in a way that you're just like, that's that person's role, right? I'm not going to bug them every day. It's not how they are. They're more like they operate in a different way. Then there's the person that's by your side helping me run the company, more of like an involved on a day-to-day operations level. I have a problem with how do I do this or my business plan, can you review it? And then there's that person. So you start to really learn. I think people really need to understand who they're working with and also cater to that, because you also don't want to annoy them. So I started to learn, like, if it was a question that any investor could answer, I would distribute that. I'm like, well, I bugged that person last month. Let me bug this other person. So it does sound weird, but you distribute your requests a little bit.
Keep track of who you've bugged.
Yeah. Who have you bugged? Because at the same time, these are really busy people and they're brilliant people. And so it's amazing that they're there for you, but don't overstay your welcome. My biggest thing.
Yeah.
So I try to be really careful and intentional of when I am calling that, because you don't want fatigue. And I just know with how busy I am and how many requests I often get for mentorship or support, they're getting tenfold. So sure. I think having that awareness is really important as well. But the way I keep them engaged is, I think investors want to know. They want little, like I sometimes text them, like it's obnoxious, like, oh my God, here's my new printed can. I send each one of them a text and they get excited because it's a little thing, but it's like, our printed cans was a huge turning point for us. Just from last week, we finally moved to printed cans, which for those in the beverage industry, they know why I'm freaking out about this. But it brings down your COGS. It's like a turning point in your growth. And so I'm texting them all little pictures of it, and there's that fun stuff, but I don't overdo it. And then there's the typical board meetings, and then there's the in-between, like a quick email of, oh, this cool thing happened, or I'm struggling with something. I think investors want to know both the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if you're only sharing the good, that's not good. So you have to find a way to communicate with them where you're not annoying them, you're not sending too much all the time. So I do believe it's an art and a science, and it's something I take very seriously because, again, going back to gratitude, I'm in that constant state of, I'm so grateful. So let's not overstay our welcome here. So
yeah, oh, it's so beautiful. I really love that. And we're going to be wrapping soon, but I do have another really important question because it's a really meaningful one that I think you've done a beautiful job of, and that's around purpose. And you've said that in a business, yes, you might be selling a product, right? And there's dollars and cents attached to that. But how do you think about the greater purpose of SkinTē and how you're delivering on that every day, and how you can orient the team and your investors and yourself around that mission?
That's great. Amy Elizabeth and I, when we started the company early on, it was purpose-driven from inception in terms of even the product we created, which was all around health and wellness from the inside out. It all went through major. So from the thought around the herbs having an emotional impact. And we grew 300% last year in the middle of COVID. And over people would write and say, oh my God, this is my go-to COVID drink. And Amy Elizabeth and I would just cry because it was one of those things where that's what we wanted the drink to be. It was self-care in a can. So from the beginning, the purpose of it was to make people feel good, to make people feel healthy from, an emotional and physical standpoint. Beyond that, though, I've always been wired that I want to, that the two, making a lot of money and giving back, especially Richard Branson, had a big influence on me from day one of, doing good doesn't have to be separate from making a lot of money. And I'm a huge believer in that. And I've done the nonprofit, I've done the for-profit, and I've realized that my heart is in the intersection of both. And so for SkinTē early on, we knew it was going to be purpose driven. And right now we haven't launched it yet, but our purpose is around this notion of beauty comes in all stripes, which is, a nod to our branding. But the idea behind beauty, when we say beauty comes in all stripes, is it really starts with loving yourself. I think that's a huge one that we've recognized, especially since COVID, is self-care and seeing beauty in yourself. That's what's most important, because if you can see beauty in yourself, then you can see beauty in others, and you won't be threatened by diversity. You won't be threatened by something different. And it goes back to kind of that conversation around empathy. But if you can't give yourself that love, I believe a lot of the root cause of problems out there, with whether it's with relationships with yourself or with others, stems from not having that love for yourself. So for us, that's the number one pillar that really aligns with who we are as a brand. And that's a message we want to push out there. And of course, beauty comes in all stripes also alludes to inclusivity, right? That it comes in all these different facets, but it's not just the physical, which I believe a lot of great work is being done around different shapes and body sizes and ethnicities, but it's also around character. It's also around how you treat yourself and others. So we want to play a role, even if it's a tiny role, in bringing forward that message and having a meaningful conversation around it.
So beautiful. I love that. So self-love, self-care, and inclusivity. Amazing. I actually am positioned right across the street from Farm Shop in Los Angeles, where I'm going to go get a SkinTē right now after I finish my Alyssa Goodman drink, because it's divine. I actually was a fangirl, and then when Bassima reached out, I was like, I'm obsessed with SkinTē. It's so good. So everybody go try it. Bassima, can you tell everybody where to find you and your products and to follow and support you?
Thank you. Yeah, follow us at SkinTē, and they'll see a lot of information there. But we're in Sprouts nationwide, and we're in 2,000 stores in total across the country. But Sprouts, you'll definitely find us, and we're on Amazon, we're on .com, we're on Goop Kitchen, we're on Instacart. So if you do a quick search, you'll be able to find us. And also on our website, they show all the locations. So
awesome. Thank you so much for being here, for giving us your time. We're grateful for you. And I'm going to go into the rest of my day with a grateful heart. Thanks to your
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.